It'll play the music as well, huh?
Mm-hmm. Good.
It doesn't play so you can hear it too.
You can open this tree.
Alright, so it's pretty easy build. We're just kind of doing a test here. This is basically just a pile of parts. All these parts, that's $77.50. It's basically one that I bought on eBay that was completely taken apart. Someone took it apart and I assume couldn't get it back together again because it was all messed up. So the first thing that we're going to do here is kind of work on getting the mechanisms that are responsible for setting and winding the watch. As you can see here, this one's really dirty. That's okay, we're gonna have fun and build it anyway. This movement is really reliable movement. Need to polish my movement holder, it's kind of raunchy. So this part right here slides on this little post. It's going to take some time to get used to working under the microscope. This part slides on this little post right here. Kind of wiggles back and forth, if you can see. Now normally we would oil these contact points here, we would actually grease them, but this is just kind of a visual reference and kind of a just a test run, kind of having fun with it. So these components right here, we got one that will move over and it kind of sets the watch when it moves over. This one right here, when it re-engages to that point, it kind of winds it. As you can see, when you spin the crown on the stem, it turns the winding pinion there. This movement is pretty cool. It's got a lot of different parts to it, so it can be a little confusing at parts. This next part here has a really important job. This one's responsible for holding the stem in place. So once again too, we're going to move this little U-shaped spring out of the way. Just kind of let it slide over and fall into its home there. And so you can see it puts pressure on it as it goes. So the other part that's on this right here next is going to be the other part that's responsible for holding the stem into place. Just slides in right here, locks in right there, and you can see when all these move, they all contact each other. And so this contacts that point. Well, we'll get it to lock first here. Okay. But when you pull it out, it would engage that point and lock over and then slide it back. Kind of a cool part. All these are so over-engineered, it's insane. It's kind of cool getting to see it in such intricate detail. Normally we'd be using a little loop on our eye, and so I really couldn't share much with anyone. Alright, so next to the tester we got this little cool guy right here. He's kind of a goofy looking part. As you can see, this one's all scratched up and damaged because, once again too, it's just a tester. So this part right here will actually fit into that part that I just showed you. So we can move it in and kind of base assemble it here, but this will slide into this little wheel right here. And once again too, these are contact points, and so you would be oiling these on the inside here where it meets. I'll bring it up here to show an example. Back it up here. But this piece right here fits in to that piece. Official terminology, of course. Alright, so next we're going to install it on the watch. Let's put it back in here. Just start to do it there. Readjust our view so you can see it engaged in the watch. Alright, we got a good view there. So with our part slot on, we'll go ahead and move it towards me. This post right here is what seats that wheel that I showed you, and it's really important that that, of course, would have gotten oil or grease or whatever. That particular one would have gotten a grease called, ironically enough, Gizmo. So this piece fits in now over. This acts as kind of like a sandwich to hold everything down. You don't want to go apply too much force. Kind of be gentle, move everything, and eventually it'll give if everything's in the right spot. So let's back it over there, back there, and we'll go ahead and lock it in place right here. It should give us enough time to find the screws that'll hold that rascal down. So these screws are always the really long, skinny ones. Kind of get a little tip on them. This watch has so many different screws, it's easy to get them all mixed up. Go over those, of course, a better view. But for starters, we got number 1 and number 2 here. So let's move this over into view. And I cannot believe how dirty this watch is. We would normally clean this first. Our cleaning machine will be up and running here shortly. So with that, go ahead and screw these in place. Get my fat finger out of the way. Alright. So now that everything's kind of locked into place, we got to get that, at least some of that off there. That's just terrible. That's really bad. It bothers me, even though it's just a dummy tester. He needs some love too. So now you can kind of see how the mechanism on this watch differentiates between setting and winding, and so whenever you wind the stem, oh, our detent's not in place. So let's check this out here. Let's see. sure we got this locked in there. It's grooving down. We press this little release detent here. Just a little bit to slide it in. Now we're in proper place. We can see the difference between the engagement between what would be winding and what would be considered setting. When it winds, of course, it goes to one side, and then this moves over to the other hour wheel, and the train itself is functioned by that. So now that we got our thing set up here, I'm going to take a look at it here, some of the different things on the watch. And of course we can release a guide that will show you the part names and all that as well. This is just kind of a tester for once. Kind of start somewhere, right? So we know that that's working, rock and rolling, we're looking good, everything is functioning correctly. We'll go ahead and flip the movement over. And we'll take a look at some of the gnarly stuff going on this side here. Without any of the components in there, it's hard to damage any of these. So we're back to the original view. You can see that this watch probably had some kind of water damage or something at a certain point. This old oil really needs to be cleaned. It's bad. You would never want to actually proceed with putting this in customer's watch or anything like that. It's far gone past that point. But maybe we can do a restoration video and do some perlaging or something and show some refinishing techniques that we could do to bring this back to life for someone. Looks like it still has the pallet fork in there, so we're going to go ahead and take that out so we can free the gear train when we install it. So just 1 and 2. Alright. So we'll go ahead and get these out of the way here. So ironically enough, those screws are the same as the main bridges and a lot of the main plates, and so it's easy to mix them up, but at the same time, it's not a big deal. As we can see, this watch is dirty. It bothers me, the fact that it's so dirty. So I'll just give it a gentle rub just to get some of that nasty stuff off of it so I don't have to look at it all the time. But it really needs to be put through the cleaning machine. Alright, so now we're going to be moving on in the parts, the pile of parts here. We're going to pick out this little guy. It's an interesting looking part. It's it kind of looks like just a little piece of flimsy foil or something to that extent. Not much going on there, but he's got a really important job. So this basically, little rascal, this will flip over on this point right here. If you can get it. This will flip over and go right here. So let's go ahead and get a better view of this here. We'll go over it. So this basically has a really important function. Whenever this is all sandwiched together and built, this part is the part that comes out and interacts with the balance wheel and rubs against it and stops it. And that's why whenever you pull your watch out, the watch stops. It's because this actually interferes with anything. Sometimes these actually break. Not so good. In this situation, it looks like the heart of the watch, or the power source, the barrel, is actually still in complete form. Looks like it didn't get disassembled. We're going to do a 7750 barrel service in another video. This one, you can see it looks like it's in overall pretty good shape. Didn't get beat up like the rest of them. The teeth look good. Yeah, the finish is still remotely decent. It definitely needs to be cleaned. See if we can look. But it's kind of an interesting part, really important too. A little bit of wear on the bottom pivot, you can see. It's no bueno, but it is what it is. You can see that some of these teeth are sharper than the others from the wear. This would not be something we would want to use. We would want to replace that. It's seen better days. But the show must go on. So basically now we're going to install the power source here. Get this up. So we're going to go ahead and throw in the barrel there. He fits in his nice little house. Snug as a bug and a rug. All comfortable. And his worn watch. Not doing so well there. Alright, so next we're going to actually start to install the gear train, what's actually going to make the watch run. See if we can get a little focus shot here and turn the light back on, get a good view. Alright, so some fidelity there. Alright, so as we saw earlier, the pallet fork interacts here. These little holes are conveniently placed for oiling purposes. It's kind of nice to be able to see the pallet stones interact, and that's the other job that those function as. We're going to go from bottom to the top here. First wheel we're going to install is this one, this goofy looking wheel. It's one of the most important wheels in the watch. They're all pretty important, but this one is the escape wheel. And he sits right here, nice little house, chilling next to these little oiling ports there, so you can easily get some oil on him. Next here we have kind of like a transmission wheel. This guy goes down right here. Oops, sorry, wrong one. This one right. Are we missing a wheel maybe? There it is. It's just upside down. So this one is the next one. It's going to fit in right here. And this wheel is, of course, another really important wheel, but the bottom of this wheel are what the little watch hands will hold on one of the chronograph subdials. And so you can kind of imagine. Let's see. Right, so the next wheel we got is this little guy right here. He's to break down the power from the barrel. It's got bigger teeth on him, as you can see. The other. Yeah. So now we have a sandwich, a little gear train sandwich there. Alright. So, of course, with watchmaking, devil's in the details. Our little guy lifted up here, that's no bueno, so he needs to go back down to his house. And normally when you oil these, you put a little bit of oil, a little grease right there, just a tiny little bit, and kind of help hold it in place. But alright, so next is the main bridge. We'll take a look at this guy before we just throw it on. He's kind of cool looking. A lot going on here. And this one's got some damage, because once again too, I bet you all 25 jewels are dirty. Yeah, it's kind of a cool looking part there. Let's see if we can focus back in. Yeah, so kind of a lot going on. We'll kind of go over some more of the functions, but once again too, this is just for basic build instructions. So I see these videos, I've seen a couple of them, and they don't really talk about what the parts do and how they interact and all that good stuff. So this is kind of tricky at first if you've never done it. You don't want to break or damage anything, and it's almost embarrassing to put these together as dirty as this watch is. But so this part right here slides over right here. Let me get this in the camera view. Sandwich is on right there. So now, it's got a couple different reasons this wouldn't want to go down easily. So this movement holder doesn't really fit that well for this movement. These have their own that we're used to. But when we install this upper bridge, these pivots are the most important thing to protect. You don't want to break these off. If they're not in their jewels, in their housings, they could break really easily. So you just got to be careful when we're doing that there. Just check all the little different ones there. And then it looks like we have there we go. Looks like the gear train is still not free. Check the escape wheel. And once again too, it's so hard to get used to working underneath a microscope. The adjustments and all that. I'm sure as I practice and get a little bit better at it, then luckily this watch has pretty strong pivots, and so there we go. Got that one in the house there. Let's check the escapement again. Make sure that one's still good to go. And still boogered up somewhere. I know those two are good. There we go. Now we have a free running train. Boy, it's dirty, but it is not prohibited or locked up. Alright, so now, as you can see, this is Dirty Birdie. We got one. We got number 2. We got number 3. And we get a little test just to see if they're spinning. Now we'll go ahead and secure these in place. There's some conveniently little spots there. Pick out the screws to secure them. There's 3 total if I'm not mistaken. Alright. And voila. So we got our 3 screws here. Adjust this just a little bit. Alright, so first one goes in. And crown it. Number 2 sneaks in right here. And the third one is snuck in under this little part right here, which can be kind of confusing, but so you want to kick out the chronograph arm. And then you'll want to put your little screw in its housing. ABC, always be grounded. Okay, screws in place. Now we know the gear train's got power. Everything's free and moving. It's filthy. We're going to go ahead and move on to the ratchet wheel. It's got, another, of course, another important job. He's like a transmission. He's the transfer of power. Cool part. I've always liked the look of this one. It's kind of metal. Alright, so the ratchet wheel goes on top of the barrel. So we have our barrel here. This is the click spring for this watch. It's kind of different than your average click spring. So, alright. So, we're going to go ahead and put in our screw for our ratchet wheel. A lot of people think that it's the big fat headed screw because on almost every watch it is, but ironically enough on this movement it is not. It is one of these little guys here. And I often see these with the wrong screw in. So alright, so now you can see how the ratchet wheel, this dirty, filthy ratchet wheel, has a very cool job. But first, we need to get his brother on here so that it makes sense. You got power coming in this way, so we need some kind of transmission between here and there. And that's where these nifty difty crown wheels come in. This one fits on right there. You would oil the insides of this normally with a nice HP 1300, something to that extent. So this one sometimes has a crown wheel underneath. Alright, this part right here goes on and sandwiches in here. We're going to see if we can get this thing running, and then that'll be a good part one, just testing the microscope out. Alright, so we're going to line these up with our housing there. And these are the same little tiny screws, basically. So we'll go to the other one. Let's get it in place. Alright. So number one. Alright, we got them in there. Underneath this chronograph. So it's got to be powered by something there. God, I think this is one of the worst ones I've ever seen. Honestly, it's just the first month of watchmaking school, they don't want to give you anything decent, and so they just give you ones that have been butchered by other watchmaking students for like 30 years. And yeah, this is probably worse than some of the ones that I saw there during that time period. Alright, so now we've got a way to set the watch, a way to wind the watch. We've got a gear train, and we've got a power source, and we've got a transmission to transfer the power from our fingers to the barrel, to the spring, to the gear train. So next we're going to put in something to lock all that power up so that this doesn't all get released at once. Because if we wind this, of course, it's just going to go and go and go. You can almost hear it. So, it's so bad for the watch. Don't ever do this. This is we might as well paint this thing red. It's a party. It's a party. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and install the pallet fork. This is one of my favorite watchmaking parts in the world. It's just so cool looking, so cool shaped. We'll kind of check it out for a little bit because it's just so different. This one right here, once again too, this booger is in bad condition. Wow. Let's see if we can zoom in and really check this weird looking creature out. So, okay, there we go. Getting it. Alright. Yeah, so this thing has these pronged stones that interact with the escape wheel, the first wheel that we installed in the gear train. And they interact at such a rapid rate and so many beats per hour, it is absolutely insane. So they have to be made out of something that can handle that. And so instead of going metal on metal, which some were, this was the solution. Ooh, look at that Rodico. Look at all that nasty stuff in it. You can only imagine what's in watches sometimes. So yeah, so this guy, basically, he has the responsibility of holding back all that power and making sure that it doesn't just immediately get transferred into that escape wheel. So this guy goes in right here. It's kind of a delicate process. Let's see if I can show you. The lighting's hard to see. This may be a little bit better with no light on this one. And so this guy fits into this little tiny jewel underneath this wheel right here. And he's very delicate. I can very see. You definitely have to turn the light just to get him in there. Normally we work really close to our things here, but I'm trying to learn how to work at a different focal point and use the power of the microscope. It's just so cool. It's like a new toy, almost. Get excited, like you're a little kid or something, to use it. Alright, so this little homie sandwiches down in here, and we gotta be gentle because we don't want to break those really little delicate pivots, so we're just gonna slot him in. Let him go into his house, be happy. It's like Bob Ross, but watchmaking. Alright, so now you can see that he's in his little home. He's out of action because the forks aren't lined up here. He's beat up, he's scarred. So we're just going to move him over to this little silver heliopad there, where he'll do most of his work. And then we have a small bridge that looks like this that has one little jewel on the top. And the jewel on the top is for the pivot. Just like the stones, since it moves so much, this part has a big responsibility. So we want to make sure that he's good there. So, alright, there we go. Even my Rodico has stuff on it. Alright, so now the same size screws that would have held down the main plate there, I'm going to go ahead and throw them in there. Try not to fling them across the room, that's no fun. A broom should come standard in every watchmaker's toolkit, because we're on the floor a lot looking for stuff, and if they don't admit that, then they're lying to you. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get these little homies in their place. Voila, numero uno. 2 here. What is that? Alright, so let's put him in here. Let's get him so I can see it. You don't want to put your finger on the movement, really. Your hands, nothing, you don't want to touch it. I'm trying to touch the side of this, even though this thing's seen more action. Alright, so now that we have the pallet fork, we can do a demonstration of how it locks. Whenever the pallet fork locks, it's going to lock to one side. And so you can see when we put winding pressure on the stem, as you can see on the other screen, the gear train no longer is freely moving. Goodness gracious, look at all this dirty stuff in there. It's just insane. You gotta get that. You gotta get out of there. Get out of there. Alright. Dab that a little bit, just so if there's any free floaters going on there. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and give it a little power, and we're going to test the action of the pallet fork to see the health of the gear train. So we're just going to get this little area right here, and we're just going to check it out to see if it will interact with the pallet fork, how it looks, all that jazz. So test the action out, see, we're good. Alright, let's move. Now the fun part, this is the true heart of the watch. So you have your power source, and then you have your balance. These things are a watchmaker's best friend and worst nightmare all at once. Like a dog, a bad dog. Alright, so look at this crazy guy. This is really cool. This one is designed by ETA, because this is a caliber 7750. And so it has a pretty cool feature on it, the Ettercon system. It's an adjustable regulation system. It allows you to change the rates and the beat error and all kinds of different things, making simple adjustments, rather than having to mess with this hairspring. Now, like all the hairsprings, this one's a lot more forgiving than most of the ones that we're ever going to see, especially in stuff that we deal with, but it's still a pain in the butt, and it's still incredibly easy to mess up. And so you got to be careful. This is the backside view of it. Now we're going to go ahead and install it in the watch and check it out. We're going to talk about the upper jewels. So this can be a little tricky if you've never done it before. The best piece of advice that I can give you is to anchor the pallet fork to the left, maybe like one side, left or right. I prefer the left side for the way that I interact the jewel on the bottom of the balance that we didn't really talk about that much, because yeah. So let's see if we can get this in the camera here, and this is going to come in here. And we're going to go ahead and seat this down. We don't want to break anything. And so it didn't start up immediately, and so we know that the lever system isn't working correctly. So what we're going to want to do is just gently lift up here, pull it over so the jewel will catch, drop it back down, and boom. It's like a heart getting electricity just coming to life. And so now the jewel on the bottom is interacting with the little slot in that pallet fork. And this one has a really, really bad end shake because we haven't secured it down. So let's go ahead and secure it, and let's take a look at it and see what we're working with here with our eBay purchase. So let's go ahead and give it its security system here, anchor it down. Alright, so this will adjust the end shake of the balance when we do that. As you can see now, it's still not good. Slowly releasing that power and that spring that's stored in that barrel, and that's basically how the watch runs itself. Now, when we wind it more, we're going to increase the power and get it going here. And we'll notice when we increase the power, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to run faster. And so now, we've picked up kind of like a standard rate speed. We can tell a lot about the watch by this right here. Everything. In watchmaking, all the important stuff is in the details of the watch itself. And in this part, the hairspring, it's absolutely amazing how little things have big translations. And so it's something that we'll definitely have to touch on a different later point in time. But for starters now, we've got a running watch. We got the gear train installed. We got it ticking. It's probably not ticking very well considering how dirty it is. I mean, look at this right here. Absolutely terrible. That's the kind of stuff we don't want. So, whoever played with this and couldn't get it back together at first also managed to get it very, very dirty. You can see how dirty it is. Even like a gentle little wipe with something to absorb some oil on the back of this. You don't want to touch the top. Get some of those fingerprints off. Anyway, clean it. We'll have to do a cleaning cycle for this next video. So now, as you can see, our pile of parts is slowly getting smaller here. Running out of things to install. Alright, and so now that you can see the balance running, we're going to go ahead and move on to installing the chronograph. But we'll have to wait for part 2 to see how it goes. So thanks for tuning in, and until next time, cheers.